butterfly shop. So today we're going to be doing a parachute atoms. So the cool thing about this fly, just subtle variations in material. You'll be able to create patterns for whether it's PMDs. You can also do blue wing olives, so you can do something with an olive body. You can do something similar to this with the pale yellow. You can also do, say, a purple haze. So I'll actually open up my box here. And you'll notice that the purple haze is essentially just a parachute atoms. So just by even changing the body color, you can create quite a few different patterns. So today we're going to be doing the classic atoms like this guy here. So in our vise we've got a Daiichi 1180 in a size 14, and for thread we're going to be using UTC 70 denier in blue dun. So to start, we're just going to start our thread just behind the eye of our hook. We're going to wrap forward just to secure and trim off our excess. Just going to wrap back to about the barb of the hook. So for our tail today, traditionally you can also use, say, like a cape feather, strip off the bottom section, but today we're going to be changing it up a little bit and using elk mane. So we're just going to be using this material here, super long, so we can cut it to length before we stack it, and we're just going to be using, say, about 8 fibers just to make sure our tail isn't too long. So I'm just going to snip off and I'm going to start stacking. So now that we have our tips lined up here, I'm just going to snip off the butt sections. Makes it a little bit easier to tie in. And for our tail, we don't want it super long. We want it about 1 hook cape in length. So we'll tie this in just on top of the shank here. Wrap forwards just to create a little bit of a tapered body. And with the tips, we can cut off the excess and wrap back towards our tail. So for our dubbing, we're just going to use an Adams Gray in the super fine from Hareline. So we don't want a whole lot of dubbing. We're just going to create a small dubbing noodle, add a little bit of a taper to it. We only want it to be about 1.5 inches long to about 2 inches. I'm going to start wrapping this forward here. If you run out of dubbing, you can always add a little bit more. Just be careful not to add too much to the fly. So once I get to about halfway between the point of the hook and the eye, we're going to be tying in our parachute. So for the parachute, traditionally you can use like a calf, you can do a natural material, you can use a synthetic Parapost. But today I'm going to be using Hareline's Afterglow fiber. Really like this synthetic material. It's great for laying on terrestrial patterns. It's also great for parachute posts. So for this, I'm just going to snip off about a 2-inch section. It's about yay big. And I'm just going to double this over. Again, wrap this around our thread. And we're going to cinch down just start making some securing wraps around the base. Again, once we get some good forward wraps, I'm going to start by coming around the top of the parachute post. And I don't want to make it too high. First things first, we're going to be tying in our hackle feathers. So today I'm going to be using Keough half saddles in grizzly and natural brown. So I've sized each feather appropriately. So if I'm doing a size 14, usually I'll use about a size 12 hackle. At least with a parachute, it just gives it a little bit more surface area to float on top of the water column. And proportionately, usually it looks a little bit better than your standard size 14 hackle. Tied in my grizzly. Again, just stripping off some bottom fibers just to make an easier tie-in point. Now what I'll do is I'll actually pick up the feathers with the parapost and make some securing wraps around all three materials. So if you wanted to do like a PMD or a blue wing, usually I just use like a blue dun saddle hackle feather. Purple Haze, you can use the same color combo for the Atoms. Essentially it's just a purple Atoms. The Purple Haze has become one of my favorite flies for smaller stream fishing, for cutthroat, whether you're in BC or still in Alberta. It's been an awesome fly. So now we can add our dubbing. And I'm actually going to wrap this forward here just to the eye of the hook. Create a few little figure eights. Create a little bit of a thorax. I'm just using small amounts of dubbing. If you need to add it, just so your proportions are correct. So now that we have everything tied on the shank, I'm going to flip my vise. Get a couple wraps on that post just to make it a little more stable. Now we can actually wrap hackle feathers. Separate if you have any parapost that is stuck. So I'm actually going to grab both feathers here. I'm just going to do some touching wraps. You don't need a whole lot. I do about 2, maybe 3 wraps. Come underneath, catch it with my thread. Again, same thing underneath. And trim off the stems. Now that we have our feathers tied in, sometimes what you can do too is if you don't want to do a whip finish, grab some super glue and put a little drop just on your thread here. Make a couple securing wraps just to make sure the glue locks in. And from there, you can just snip off your tying thread. Now today we're just going to do a whip finish. So I'm just going to do about a 2 or 3 turn whip finish, just to make sure that hackle is locked in. Pull it tight and we can snip off our tying thread. So I'm going to flip the hook back in our vise here, we're just going to trim our parapost, which I'll usually leave about a hook length. And the nice thing is too, if you wanted to use a fluorescent orange or chartreuse, just for easier visibility on the water, you can totally mix and match materials, find one that's best for you. So if you wanted to do, say, a blue wing pattern, all you'd have to do is change your dubbing color and your hackle. So for this, I've just used blue dun. If you wanted to do a PMD, again, same thing. Just change your hackle feather and your dubbing color. And don't be afraid to mix different tailing materials. If you wanted to use a cape, if you wanted to use mayfly fibbits, which are synthetic. I hope this video was helpful. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave us a comment.